Yeah. The NHL playoff is now set. Welcome to a special live presentation. And I got to tell you, Marco, it's great to frickin' be here today. Why? Because we're talking about the playoff bound Montreal Canadiens. Good morning, Marco. You were in the building yesterday. Give me a contrast. Ivan Demidov's debut versus the Canadiens clinch a playoff spot. Paint a picture for the ambiance, the audio experience of Demidov debut, Habs clinch last night.
Actually, I took a video of it as the in the last dying seconds of the
Yes.
game yesterday, and the noise was so loud that I don't think my phone was able to properly capture it. It was just like white noise.
Yeah.
So I just, at that point, when you reach a decibel level that a phone can't comprehend, it was loud in there. And I got to say, there are some times in the Bell Center where a goal will be scored or a play will happen or an announcement will be made, and the roar is so strong that the press gallery will vibrate. And I think yesterday, Nick Suzuki's goal, the second goal, basically, we felt a good, solid vibration from the crowd. And it was honestly, it was a really nice precursor to what will probably be a really fun first round playoff run against the Washington Capitals.
Yes. I want to take care of a couple of quick things here before we get into the nitty gritty. I'm going to speak for Marco D'Amico. If Marco wants to talk for himself, the platform will be his when I'm done. You can leave Marco alone now with the keyboard and the pounding on the desks. We've read the comments. We've seen the comments. There he goes as he walks away again. Marco, it is not personal against me. It is not unprofessional, even though you could perceive it to be that way. So understand me when I tell you that we read the comments, get the comments, and we're always open for constructive criticism. And you can
my hands are in
me,
my pockets.
Yeah, you can trust me as the person that started this channel. That it also has sometimes thin skin. That it's not personal. Marco isn't unprofessional. Marco isn't playing Candy Crush, waiting for his turn to talk. There are multiple things, multiple multitasking ventures going on. So we can just cool the jets in the comment section with the keyboard and the hands and the phone, ba 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 ba. As this man here broke the Ivan Demidov story. You think he's playing Candy Crush 24/7? Lots of things going on. Anything to add before we move on, Marco?
Yeah, no, my hands are in my pockets. My eyes are on the camera. We're good.
So we've got lots to get to. So we're going to be obviously previewing in depth on multiple occasions the Capitals and Canadiens first round matchup, which we can tell you will begin on Monday. So it looks like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday for games 1, 2, 3, and 4, with 3 and 4 being the ones that hopefully, if you're lucky enough, you're going to have some tickets to go to and go check them out, because it's going to be an amazing experience. So before we get to some of your comments, and we're going to get to some of your questions and your comments in a second, but let's pick Marco's brain for a second, because one of the questions I was tossing around with my man Simon Salikas on TSN 690 this morning as I take notes as the game is going on, right? And a couple of notes that I wrote to myself, and I apologize if you listen to the morning show and maybe there's going to be a little repetitiveness here, but a couple of things I wrote to myself was, is the rebuild over? And how did they accomplish this? Let's remember that the Vegas odds makers had a point total of over under 76.5. Montreal finishes the season with 90 points and clinches the 8th and final playoff spot in the conference. So let's get to that. Let's talk about how did they accomplish that, in your view, before we get to whether or not the rebuild is over. So how'd they do it, Marco?
They had a very effective top line. They found themselves a potential franchise defenseman, and Samuel Montembeault proved, I think, without a shadow of a doubt, that he is an effective number one goalie in the NHL. I think that's what you've been able to learn this season. Secondary notes to that is that the Canadiens now have a functional, or semi-functional towards the end of the season, less so much, but a functional power play, or at least the skeleton of a functional power play. Mm-hmm. And they were able to, get some confirmation that they have, at least a solid depth of top end defensemen in the form of Lane Hudson and Kaden Guhle to bank on for the next coming years as they wait for other guys to push themselves up the lineup through the minors.
So what about the rebuild? I can get to the point where, yes, they've turned the corner on the rebuild. And the other part to the question, right, about is it over or not, is one of the main points of thinking is, Okay, let's talk about when Demidov is here. Let's talk about when Fowler's here. Let's talk about when Reinbacher's playing hockey. Let's talk about Lane Hudson finding his place.
Yep.
And the answer to all of those things is they're all here and they're all doing some pretty good work collectively and individually. So if the heart of the rebuild is in layered ways here and establishing themselves, why is the rebuild not over then?
I think a rebuild is not. I think it's a phased approach, right? Like you'll
Yeah.
have the rebuild where you're just like massively trying to acquire top end assets and bring in these younger guys rapidly to try to get them into the organization and turn things around. And I think there's an ever important second phase. And I think this is, again, I'm not an NHL GM, so I'm not going to pretend like I know it all, but this is from observation. I always feel like when rebuilds fail at this junction, whereas at what point do you take the next step and how aggressive do you get? And I think that's where the Canadiens are right now, is that they're at the junction where they need to go into phase two. And phase two is more, in my honest opinion, more like progressive core buying. And to make that, or to bring that to light, when the core is ready and they've made the playoffs, what do the Canadiens currently lack right now in this lineup? They lack an established number 2 center, and they lack a top 4 right shot defenseman that can hold down one of the top 2 pairs with either Matheson, Hudson, or Guhle, depending on who you want to play around on the left side. That's what they lack right now. So as an organization, where they're at right now, especially where Suzuki and Caulfield are in age as a core, I think they have to go and get those pieces in the next 12 months. And so I think that is still a part of a rebuild, because you're still going to try and get age appropriate players. You look at a team, I was sitting next to Pierre Dorion, former general manager of the Ottawa Senators. We were having this conversation because, he was in awe of a guy like Sam Rinzel in Chicago. And Sam Rinzel was picked in the 20s in the 2022 draft. And Pierre was saying, I don't remember that draft because I traded all my picks away for Alex DeBrincat. Well, that's the kind of move that can make or break a rebuild, right? And so the Canadiens have to be careful, because they're at that point where the Ottawa Senators thought themselves to be in 2022 on the cusp, except the Canadiens actually made the playoffs. And so you have the core here, and you didn't have Ivan Demidov the whole season. Mm-hmm. If you're able to bring in a center that could play with them while sacrificing some of the younger players, not the top end ones, but expendable players. A couple of the first round picks the Canadiens have now confirmed to be 16 and 17th overall in the 2024 draft, unless the Canadiens go on an improbable run to the conference finals. So they can use one of those 2 picks, if not both, plus players, to go and try and get the needs that they have. But I don't think the Canadiens are going to go out and get guys in their mid-30s either.
Right, I agree with that. They shouldn't. You wouldn't want.
This is why I'm saying it's like a phased approach. And when they are ready to compete, that's when you get into phase 3 of a rebuild. And we saw it, for example, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they were more open to throw first-round picks to key role players, and that really helped them get to the next stage and become a cup contending team year after year.
It's amazing, when we talk about this team and like all the panic and the stress and everything else, and then reminded by Martin St. Louis about the Canadiens' record, 15-5-6, 7-1-2 down the stretch. And I'm like, it was borderline panic city. And fair enough. I mean, I'm getting called out in the comment section. Sean, you had no faith. Sean, you didn't think they were going to make the playoffs. And listen, I said I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs, but I also, if we're going to put the entire context on the table here, let's put the entire context on the table here. It came along with the fact that I had very little expectation for this. I wanted to see gradual incremental improvement team-wise individually, and hopefully it added up to something big. I never thought it was going to add up to something this big this early. So I'm happy to be wrong. I'm very happy to be wrong. And that's, that comes with the territory of doing content on the daily, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on terrestrial radio. You got to say something. You just can't give the old, no, let's wait and see. Come back at me after game number 82. So one of these instances,
I think in fairness, though, like, could anyone really have projected a record-breaking season from Lane Hudson? I don't think anybody in their right mind would have seen that happening right now, right? Like, I remember Stéphane Leroux had a bet with his son Jasmin over at RDS, that Hudson would hit 40 points this season. He went 50% plus over that total. I had him projected at 45 points. He blew right by that, and then Nick Suzuki jumping from 77 points to 89.
Yeah.
Especially given how underwhelming the Canadian center line has been in general this season is, insane in my honest opinion. And it's just, he finished 6th in scoring among centers in the NHL. That to me says everything you need to know. Even from a point per game basis, he's still a top 10 center this season. So those were, I thought he was going to probably get to 82, but 89, almost 90. I thought he should have gotten an assist on Jake Evans's goal. 30 goals, that's hard to predict. Cole Caulfield, 70 points. Again, I thought there was going to be progress. He was at 65 points season last year, I believe.
Yeah.
So I thought there was going to be progress. And then Juraj Slafkovsky, against all odds, considering where he was in January, still manages to improve over last season with 51 points instead of 50. I mean, there was some good push here. And I think the wild card was always going to be like, what happens? Is the Canadiens' defense going to hold? And they almost didn't towards the end. It looked like they were they needed the rest. And I think a Monday game is the best thing to happen to them. 4 days off before the next game to really kind of rest up after a ridiculous end of the season. I think that's where you see the hard to predict. And that's the thing with rebuilds, right? It's very hard to predict rebuilds. A lot of models had the Canadiens in the bottom 7, bottom 8. I personally had them finishing anywhere between 12th and 10th to last.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, I gave them a little bit more of a thumbs up than most, but I honestly, if you would have told me that Lane Hudson would have been in the 60-point range, then I would have definitely put them in the spot that they are now. And I think at the end of the day, it's easy to say, hey, you had him low, you didn't have him low. There were maybe 4 people in the entire media spectrum that had them where they were going. And most of the professional scouts I spoke to did not have the Canadiens in a playoff run. Well, this isn't to say it, and this isn't a game of who's right and who's wrong, but this is when we talk about organizational growth, development, culture, those are things that you can't measure. And so when you see it happen in front of you, well, you can't help but shrug your shoulders and say, they proved us all wrong.
And that's, the thing about the rebuild, and, you make a lot of good points. The funny thing about rebuilds is I think, you go into a rebuild and you task players with certain assignments and you experiment and roles and see if it's a sink or swim type of thing, and when you challenge players to fulfill certain roles and they excel and they exceed and they obviously pass the challenge, I think it allows you to move on to other things. Like whether you think, Juraj Slafkovsky is this guy or Alex Newhook can provide the answer to the 3-team role. Like other teams like Buffalo or Detroit or whatever, they might be in more of it still the experimental phase where the Canadiens, through good scouting, good development, luck, all of it adds up to kind of what they were able to accomplish with a very relatable coach. And the thing to me, Marco, before you jump in, the thing to me that I think really overwhelms me with positivity is I get hockey is maybe right there with football is the most team-oriented sport that we watch. And to see how this team dealt with the Kirby Dach injury, dealt with the Patrick Laine absence, Kaden Primo lacking confidence, replaced by Jakub Dobeš, Alex Carrier, that they pick up each other, they fight through adversity. Yes, there are peaks and valleys, but what really puts me over the top is how they climb out of valleys and get to the peak. And they did that multiple times and got better at it as the season kind of grew on, where their longest winning streak was 3, and then that went away. Then it went to 5, and then that went away, and then it went to 6. So there was incremental improvement and great team play that allows me a good threshold of trust that the coach is the right person, the management are the right people, and the prospects are the right players, and there's more to come.
Yeah, I don't think it's as rosy as that in the sense. So, like, for example, I really like the point that you made where you're trying people in different roles and you want to see if they sink or swim.
Yeah.
Well, they basically gave Lane Hudson Mike Matheson's role from last year, and he thrived, absolutely thrived.
And he was reassigned.
Yeah. And then you have Mike Matheson, who is basically given Kaden Guhle's role from last year, which is basically playing in all the defensive situations. And I don't think many people could really say that he was consistent enough to be someone that you could move forward in that role with moving forward. I think they need to slide Kaden Guhle back into that situation, because it did look like at times that Mike Matheson was a little overwhelmed, and he does look much better when he doesn't have all those defensive responsibilities and he's allowed to express himself more vividly in transition at 5-on-5. So there's a sink or swim element in there. And then you, like you mentioned, you brought up Alex Newhook. I think for all intents and purposes, Alex Newhook did very well in the role that he was given with the players that he was given. I think, you know, the ever rotating cast on that second line and having to will Patrick Laine at times at 5-on-5, who, look, I thought he played a good game at 5-on-5 yesterday before they shortened the bench. So I'm not gonna say he's terrible. It's just unfortunate inconsistencies that create frustrations among fans. And so I thought he did very well, and it was a great audition for next year and potentially being the Canadiens' third line center. So you learned a lot from this. I think you learned where the Canadiens absolutely need to improve, which players they need to hold on to, and which players could potentially be expendable. And I think in a rebuild situation, when you want to go from phase 1 to phase 2, that's exactly what you need. So for the Canadiens, I mean, outside of maybe one or two slight negative elements, I think there's a whole lot of positivity to look at. But I feel like, you know, there's still some work to be done.
I love this. Habs legend fan 33. The greatest player to ever suit up for the Montreal Canadiens, award number 33, and his name is Patrick Waugh. I will fight anybody. And you asked my buddy Simon Salikas, the greatest player to ever wear the Canadiens is Chris Chelios, number 24. So everyone has their favorite.
That's because he's biased.
Who isn't? Who's your favorite all-time Montreal Canadian player?
Not an Italian.
It's not Michael Pezzetta.
No. Although Michael Pezzetta is probably
Matt D'Agostini.
No, Mike Camilleri, imagine. No.
I thought he was Jewish, though. I thought Camilleri was Jewish. I thought he had a Jewish mom.
He is, but as it turns out, you could be Italian and be of the Jewish faith.
That's nice. Real nice.
So, no, favorite player probably just because of my age. All time. Oh, all time. Well, look, if you have to go all time in terms of the tape that I've watched, Jean Beliveau.
No, I don't know. I want someone you watched with your own, not Maurice Richard or Guy Lafleur there, you know?
Okay. Saku Koivu for me was the emotional, just because like he and my grandmother were at the hospital fighting cancer at the exact same time in separate rooms.
Oh, wow.
So that's where young Marco D'Amico got into hockey. But in terms of when he came back from cancer, you know, put up 70-point seasons on a Canadiens team that really needed a true number one center. To me, he was a heart and soul player. And again, when they retire number 11 eventually one day, I hope that they pull a Dickie Moore, Yvan Cournoyer, and his number is up there with it.
Listen, start flooding the chat. There's so many questions and comments. I'm going to get to them when we're done. We're going to be just a couple more questions I want to pick Marco's brain on. Then we'll get to some of your questions you see here. Habs in 6, LFG. Caps look tired from the goal chase. Okay, from your lips, I'm on board. Let me talk. I want to talk about Ivan Demidov for a second. Got about 7 fewer minutes in game 2 than his pro debut, and less minutes on the PP as well. Again, you know, the Canadiens were in tight quarters with Carolina, so I understand the minutes. But talk to me about what you saw quickly from game number 2 for Ivan Demidov before I get to my other Demidov question.
Yeah, I think in terms of his play in the offensive zone and his effort, you saw him use the body a little bit against the boards to separate players from pucks. Again, like these are aspects of his game that I feel like were underrated when we came to scouting reports on him. I thought he was very engaged, just an absolute magician when it came to stick handling in the offensive zone, protects the puck really well.
Yes, he does. He's bigger than I thought. He's bigger than I thought.
He's, again, about 6'1", 192.
And he hits, Marco. He hits. I like it.
Yes, he does hit. He's got an edge to him. And I think, like a lot of people were surprised by that. I watched him in the KHL, so I wasn't necessarily surprised. Yeah. But it was his willingness to engage, and I feel like you're going to see a little bit more in the playoffs. But I felt like, there was a moment in the second period where he made a blind behind-the-back pass in the defensive zone that was intercepted by the Carolina Hurricanes and led to a couple of offensive chances. And then Martin St. Louis started shortening the bench. Right. And I think that play kind of cost Demidov and that whole line, because Patrick Laine, was okay, I found, but you felt that line was being, picked apart by the opposition just because it didn't seem to have such a level of cohesion in the neutral zone. So I get it. You're trying to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
This isn't this, I could obviously sit here and argue that I believe that Ivan Demidov is good enough to be on the first power play wave. And I believe that the Canadiens' first power play wave is kind of hindered right now because Patrick Laine is just not moving and staying in his spot, and everybody knows that puck is going to him.
Preach.
Like we talk about the Ovechkin situation, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to bring attention to this. Ovechkin stayed in his spot because John Carlson, who was at the point, now Jacob Chitrin or Rasmus Sandin, whoever you want to put there, whoever they put at the point was a shooting threat at that point as well. So if John Carlson unleashed a cannon back in the last 10 years of him playing with Ovechkin on the power play, it was dangerous enough to afford the defending forward to advance to try and block the shooting lane, therefore making a passing lane available either left or right. That's not the case with Lane Hudson. Lane Hudson doesn't have a shooting ability. It's not there. It's probably a wrist shot that goes through traffic and deflects a little bit. But if they're going to play that game, then Juraj Slafkovsky has to be in front of the net, not to the left of it. So they don't seem to have a proper strategy. Either you play the diamond, which is what was really effective last year, or you have to have an almost reverse umbrella formation so that you crash the net when you have these kind of outlier shots so that you can get a deflection. And I feel like the Canadiens are in the middle of the two. Whereas I feel like, for example, if you had Demidov in Slafkovsky's current spot on the right circle, Caulfield would go back to his spot on the left circle. Slafkovsky would be in front of the net, Suzuki playing bumper and Hudson playing the point. Then you'd have the perfect diamond formation. And then you could have Patrick Laine on the second wave with less coverage, second wave PK, with more room to play. And, guys like Alex Newhook, if you want to double shift Nick Suzuki, guys like Nick Suzuki, setting him up from there. So I was a little disappointed that they weren't, especially when they were looking for goals prior to the two late goals in the second period. I was a little disappointed that they weren't trying to use him. But given the situation, given, the fact that Martin St. Louis has been chugging it along with these 80 games with those guys, I understand the decision. I just hope that for the kids' sake and for the organization, that's not the same strategy as they start the playoffs against Washington.
How do you think they can challenge and get him more involved? Obviously, it's going to be a feel thing. They're just not going to throw him to the Wolves against Washington on Monday. They'll manage and massage the minutes the best they can. But what does Demidov do to earn more minutes? Like, how does he? I mean, the compete level immediately. He's the eye test to me. I mean, the skill. I mean, had he scored on that move yesterday, oh my God. I don't know if they would have been able to renovate the Bell Center and put it back together for Wednesday's or I guess Friday's game 2 or game 3.
Game 3.
How do you see his utilization in the early goings of the playoffs here?
Yeah, I think it's really
Demidov,
weird. It's really weird the way the Canadiens have kind of looked at that. They established the new hook line as a second line on their stat sheet, but they use it like a fourth line, which kind of don't understand. But I think it's all going to depend on matchups, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if, based on what we've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if Ivan Demidov played between 10 to 12 minutes in Washington because they have the last change and they don't want to be overexposed. Because if you're Spencer Carberry, you absolutely want the Ovechkin line matched up against them. Absolutely, positively. Because that is the weakest line from a defensive standpoint in the lineup. And it's not necessarily Demidov's fault, but a way that he could earn more minutes is showing more attention to the defensive side of the game. No wild turnovers, the safe play in the neutral zone. I know that that's absolutely annoying, but it's Ivan Demidov. You've seen him play. When they do get into the offensive zone and they do establish possession, that's when he can work his magic. But until then, it's in the playoffs, especially as the underdog, it's best to make the safe play at first, earn your coach's trust, and then those minutes will continue to come. And again, I don't know exactly what Martin St. Louis has planned, but just showing physical and defensive engagement and doing the right thing, I think will go a long ways into earning trust for that line and getting them more offensive minutes.
Lots of views. Thank you so much for joining the live stream. That's Marco D'Amico. You can follow him at Emin D'Amico with RG Media. Don't forget, we have fresh content coming out every day on this channel as of 10 a.m. As a matter of fact, tomorrow, Marco's going to lay the groundwork in a video that's out at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. The groundwork, now that the playoff teams have been determined, Marco, the Calgary Flames pick is now the property of the Montreal Canadiens. We're talking about the first round pick, and obviously the Canadiens own first round pick. Where's it going to fall? Ideas, strategies, some pretty good stuff tomorrow on this channel at 10 a.m. Are we ready to get to the comment section?
Absolutely.
I am. Thank you everybody for calling me out, and happy to be wrong, as I mentioned already. This guy makes me laugh. The comments were in before the show began today. Jesper, this is your moment to shine. And it made me laugh because I saw Jesper online yesterday a couple of different times with this exact question. I love it. I have been harassing Marco on various platforms about Bogdan in Torpedo. I know today will be about the playoffs, but a bit about this young RD playing big minutes in the KHL would be appreciated. Jesper, your wish has been granted. Let me rub the genie. There he is. Genie, answer this man's question.
That's so odd. The thing with Konyushkov is, obviously big minutes that he gets playing behind a vet this season as opposed to last season, Voinov. Yeah. It just creates a situation where you're not exactly the top guy anymore. And I can't speak to it, but I do believe there was a little bit of a falling out with his coach in terms of losing the C this year and how that affected him.
Yeah.
But he was sent down to the VHL because he's still of age where he can help in the VHL and play better. But obviously his offensive minutes and opportunities went down this year just because they felt that they wanted to bring in somebody else that was a little bit more, experienced to play the roles that he was playing. So I wouldn't necessarily worry. And then, there has been comments that he's made where he doesn't speak to the Canadiens as much as Demidov does. I think that's kind of understandable. He was a mid-round pick as an overager, and Ivan Demidov was a 5th overall pick that really shouldn't have been. And obviously his contract is coming up now, whereas Konyushkov's was coming up, I believe, at the end of next season, actually end of the 2025-2026 season.
Okay.
So the Canadiens will be in contact because, in my honest opinion, Konyushkov is a future NHL defenseman. Be it second or third pair, you'll figure it out. But I think that those conversations are going to happen. It's not like there's radio silence between the two sides. It's the Canadiens development staff are still sending him videos to work on his play, still checking in just to see how he's doing. But it's not like Kent Hughes is calling up Konyushkov and his agent and be like, how's my guy doing? Want to go for lunch? It's not that. Correct. And so it's normal. And he wasn't complaining. The direct translation maybe comes off as him complaining, but he's not. He's effectively saying, we're not at the point yet where we need to have a serious discussion.
Okay, fair. Jason, the Canadiens, Jason filled to the brim with confidence. They're going to humiliate the Capitals. The Capitals are a paper tiger. Now, Washington with 51 wins, 111 points. They won 26 games at home and were a plus 59 in the goal differential. Granted, they limped to the finish line with a 4-6 record in their last 10 down the stretch. I also understand they're not the best first period team, but guess what? The Canadiens are not a very good first period team either. I mean, I'm not confident enough to say they're a paper tiger. Beware. But I also wouldn't be as naive to think that Montreal has no business being in this series. Montreal, Marco, can give Washington a sweat here. This isn't going to be a varsity taking on a juvie team getting ready for the season here.
Did you just quote like the synopsis for D3, the Mighty Ducks?
Yes. What do you think? How do you think I get ready for these shows? Emilio Estevez is the answer to all of life's problems. They're filming Young Guns 3 too, by the way. Did you know that?
Good Lord, I did
Young
not.
Guns 3, bro. Lou Diamond Phillips is back.
I'm looking forward to that. When it comes to how the Canadiens match up against the Capitals, it's a little difficult for me in terms of being able to look at that. It really, to me, will depend on their health.
Yeah.
Ovechkin was a little banged up. Obviously we know he's not 100%. There's no way you can come out from a broken leg like that and be at 100%. definitely play through it so that he could break the record. We'll see what that does to him in the playoffs. We know that Jacob Chikrin is also dealing with something. So, yeah, there could be a little bit to that. But on the flip side, I don't know if you guys saw Nick Suzuki play hockey last night, but he looked absolutely finished by the end of that game.
Dude, I'm convinced that hit he took there against Detroit when he got caught behind, I'm convinced something happened. Something's going on. He never gets hit ever.
I'm not gonna speculate, but all I'm saying is guys like Hudson, guys like Suzuki, guys like Matheson, guys like Guhle have been taking beatings. I don't think any of them are at 100%.
Hudson got tagged last night too.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Like you saw him take a while to hold his head and check things out. So all I'm gonna say is, it's gonna be a fun series. It's going to be a fun series, but I don't think that the Washington Capitals are a paper tiger. What I will say is that they are a far more beatable team than regular first seeds normally are. And the reason for that I would say is that they, as a lot of people have said, were spent focused on trying to get that record for Ovechkin, kind of linked into the playoffs. Sure. There's a lot of unproven players on that team. Will Pierre-Luc Dubois be playoff Dubois like we saw him in Columbus, or will he not, will he be what we saw from LA last year? Will Dylan Strome be a true first-line center in the playoffs, or was he just a product of the situation? There's a lot of questions, and I'm not saying yes to all of these, right? It's obviously a little bit of gray. It may turn out that Dylan Strome has a fantastic playoffs, but that Pierre-Luc Dubois was just along for the ride. It may be the other way. It may be that Tom Wilson absolutely roughhouses the Montreal Canadiens defense, and a guy like Connor McMichael ends up being a Fernando Pisani for the Washington Capitals and scores 2 to 3 goals per game. There are so many X factors because they're such a deep team. And I think people really need to.
Let's put this comment up here. It's perfectly timed, Marco. Jesper again. Washington, nasty, big team, nasty guys. Jack-Eye playing the first game, or will the coach let us be beaten up in the first game and throw him in the second? Let's remind, 15-5-6, 7-2-1 into the playoffs. The Canadiens don't get their ass kicked. They've done unbelievably well. I get Arbor Jack-Eye is very much a fan favorite in this market here, but let's not discount what the team's accomplishments. And Arbor Jack-Eye's a part of the team. He's there with the extra skaters. He's there at practice. He's a good teammate, joking, kibitzing with Ivan Demidov. They seem to be friendly right off the hop. He's a valuable member, but I don't know how aggressive I would be in trying to put him in for game one. You got a thought on that?
My only problem is the Canadiens aren't going to go into the playoffs with one right shot defenseman.
Okay.
Because the most logical player to come out of the lineup would be David Savard. But the problem is that David Savard plays such a fundamental role on the PK in terms of the ground he covers, the shots he blocks. And that becomes ever more important in the playoffs when games get even tighter. Yeah. So I think when you look at a situation like that, the only logical other player that you could look at to do a straight shot comparable would be Jaden Struble. And to me, I thought Jaden Struble was the best defenseman on the ice last night outside of Kaden Guhle. In terms of pure defense, I thought Jaden Struble was one of the only defensemen that could properly pinch against the wall to maintain possession, was strong in the neutral zone. He hits hard, very hard. He's a physical defenseman. I would not take him out. I would not take Struble out of the lineup unless he has a terrible game one, in my honest opinion. I don't think it's going to hurt anybody. And I sincerely, I saw a lot of people say, take Matheson out and put Jack-Eye in. I sincerely doubt, and no disrespect to Jack-Eye, there is absolutely no way that either he or Struble can take on the minutes that Mike Matheson plays right now. And the Canadiens don't even want to give those minutes to Lane Hudson, who himself had so-so games leading into the end of the season, right? He looked gassed as well. So I'm not sure they want to give them that. And I don't think they have a defenseman in the lineup that who is tailor-made for that role. So unfortunately, Matheson is in it, but I can guarantee fans that there is absolutely 0 or 5% chance that Jacky would do better in that specific role. So if we're talking about where he would fit, it would be on a third pair. And right now, they can't afford to take either of the two guys on the third pair off unless they have such an off game that they need to come out.
I wish I could debate you, but we kind of see it eye to eye. What's up, fuck sakes? Thrilled for the Habs, but can I ask what happened to the Masters coverage? What did you think about Marty using Rory's win for motivation? It's a great question because we were ready to go to Augusta, live to Augusta National, with arguably the best player playing golf in this province of Quebec. He does analyst work for RDS, and he's the talented Johan Benson, former Quebec PGA Player of the Year, and he's played in the U.S. Open. He caddied on the tour for like 4 or 5 seasons. But we were ready to go. I was going to go to Augusta National, but guess what happened? This guy over here, he called me at 12 in the afternoon. He said, "Sean, are you sitting down?" I go, "Marco, what's up?" He goes, "Ivan Demidov is coming. Let's tape." I'm like, shit. Call Johan Benson. Johan, I can't tell you why, but we can't tape. I got to move on to something else. He's like, "I got it. No problem." And the rest is history. So that's the answer to why there was no Masters coverage, even though that kind of was the plan. And I totally love. And listen, Rory's roller coaster Masters Sunday is an example that can be used by any coach in any sport at any level that's worth their salt. There are so many lessons in Rory's crazy win that Rory was a child prodigy and went 10 years between majors. And then I believe this. There isn't an athlete on North American soil that goes into an environment that has more pressure on them than Rory at Augusta National. And you saw the release when he made the putt in the playoff hole to beat Justin Rose. And I think, Martin St. Louis, to me, I'm a huge MSL fan, probably to the point where I have a bias against him and I'll defend him. But I love his philosophy. I love his relatability. And he knows there's multiple lessons. Don't give up. Always believe. You're never out of it. You just need one shot and it can change everything. I know there's a lot of cliches, but it really is applicable to me. And I think if you bring that approach to a locker room and say, hey, here's an outside the box way of thinking, here's an outside the box lesson to be learned from. Rory McIlroy's adventure at Augusta National was phenomenal. Let's get going here from Surf. Love that both the Canadiens and Rocket are getting valuable experience in the playoffs. Hats off to Pascal Vincent. Marco, on that note, breaking news, the Laval Rocket are getting more talented. What happened this morning?
Joshua Roy was sent down for the playoffs, which I think makes a ton of sense when Demidov is joined, Kapanen is playing with the Canadiens, and you still have Pizzetta as an extra. I think they have their black aces for the moment, and you can send Joshua Roy down to have a very impactful playoff run with the Laval Rocket. I mean, it's so wild to look at it because you don't really know who to take out of their top 9. That's how deep they are. Probably going to move a guy like Riley Kidney further down the lineup or out of it and take a spot, on the second line. But they have three dangerous lines that they can run with. And David Reinbacher and Adam Engstrom are healthy and playing. They played last night in a tight game against the Belleville Senators. So, very, very deep roster right now. And they have a bunch of guys that they signed to ATOs, like recent ELC signing Tyler Thorpe, who's going to be there along for the ride and, maybe gets a game or two we see. But, I think Tyler Thorpe is basically there for the fun of it. It's the same thing that happened to Fleury and Jacky last year, where he was just along for that late season push. They obviously didn't make the playoffs last year, but he was there for that push. So when you look at a guy like Thorpe, I think next year it's going to be a question of does he have a spot on this roster, or is he going to go back to the WHL? And we're going to have to see, because again, Laval is absolutely stacked even for next year. It's the reason why guys like Sam Harris, who had a really strong season in the NCAA, is going back to Denver, is because they have no place to play him. So it's good to get guys like him signed, but you really have to see what it is that they can do in practice and if they grow from that and how they fit, so that they can eventually come into camp next year, hitting the ground running.
David Reinbacher, played in a losing effort at home to Belleville, and that was an everything game for the Belleville Senators. They had to win that game. Laval's trying to wrap up the number 1 seed, but Jacob Fowler, 24 shots, 22 saves. in a 1-goal loss. And he also has a 1-goal margin of victory in his pro debut when he backstopped Laval to a 2-1 win over Syracuse. So you get tagged with the L there. And but by all accounts, nice to see Reinbacher back in the mix and Fowler getting it done here. I also want to shine a little light here. See if I could put it back up here for a second. Here it is. Thank you, Morgan. Who came through? Kaden Guhle. So big on this guy. What a stud. Let me say something on this. You know, when I speak to Mark Denis twice a week, and Mark travels with the Canadiens, so he's on the road, and obviously a former pro who has a lot of access to a lot of former pros. And it's funny, he's told us several times that when he's traveling and other teams' coaches come to talk to him and get ready for the game, the one guy time and again that they fawn over, that they want to know more about because they're in awe, is the guy Morgan is bringing up. The amount of, oh my gosh, you're so lucky to have this guy commentary and opinion from other teams on Kaden Guhle. First of all, let me start here. McCann in Toronto, Tavares in Toronto. The more hit, I have time to listen to a little bit of a TSN turning point there because it got the power play going for Chicago and they won that game. But it doesn't change the fact that this guy's ready to make big plays and step up to make big contributions. And Morgan's damn right to call him out here. I'm also so big on this guy. What a stud. That was a leadership kind of game from Kaden Guhle and a leadership kind of week. How do you see Kaden Guhle's evolution here as a future leader of this team, Marco?
Yeah, he'll definitely get an A. I don't think that's I don't
Mike
think
Matheson's A is going to go to him eventually.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. And so I'm not necessarily too worried about that. Yeah. Obviously a leader on the defensive side of things. Just a couple of points. I think he's evolved into a top pair defenseman that just doesn't play on a top pair.
Yep.
So to me, having him and Lane Hudson on separate pairs next year is almost like essential so that you can spread the wealth and have a strong piece on your left side. Both are top pair defensemen. Both should be 1 and 2 on this roster, but unfortunately both are left-handed. It's not ideal to play them together as they have been over down the stretch. If they have a Reinbacher that develops properly and they're able to go and get another, bona fide top 4 right shot defenseman, they're set on that back end. So I don't have necessarily an issue. I think, from his rush defense, which is always his strength, I think what we're seeing now is his transition game has really improved and he's starting to take more shots. When you look at his shooting ability, it was always good. When he was playing in the WHL, be it for Prince Albert in his draft year, I think he had like 13 goals. You look at his contributions offensively when he was playing with the Edmonton Oil Kings en route to a WHL championship where he was given the MVP, a lot of timely goals. And then we're seeing it again this season as he's starting to put more pucks on net. He's got a ripper of a shot. So I think the Canadiens have themselves a bona fide top pair defenseman. And I think where they really need to relish on this is that they have him signed at $5.5 million for the next 6 years. And I think that to me is the biggest thing. If Kaden Guhle can stay healthy and finally get some good luck on these freak injuries, that will be a steal of a contract for many years to come.
What do you make of lots of comments here that, again, going back to handicapping the Canadiens and Capitals first round series Monday from the U.S. Capitol, that the Washington Capitals, big, nasty guys, Tom Wilson, running the Canadiens out of the barn. That's why, someone like Jack maybe needs to play. What about this angle here that Juraj Slafkovsky got to play a big man's game? I mean, I think we can agree.
So like last night.
It started in the second period. His first period was not good at all.
No,
I'll chalk it up to nerves.
Whatever happened in the first and second intermission, like between
Correct.
the first and the second during the intermission,
how confident
do that
are
again.
You that he can do this over the course of 7 games in the first round here?
The best games I've ever seen Slafkovsky play are the games where he gets mad.
Yeah, right.
And nothing gets you more upset than a couple of dirty hits in the playoffs.
Yes.
So I think that, maybe there'll be jitters at first, especially that they're starting on the road. But I expect that if the Canadiens are going to have any success in this series, he's going to play a physical element. And one thing I think that needs to be, I guess, brought to this notion is that Arber Xhekaj, very good fighter, has good physical elements,
Yeah.
And I feel like with the utilization that he was given, and we keep coming back to this, as a third pair defenseman, he looked fine to me. I don't
Right.
think he would normally deserve to be out, but given the way that the Canadiens' defense is built out, you cannot convince me that Arbor Jacki should be in over Jaden Struble the way that Struble has played the last 25 games. When he was paired with Hudson, he looked like a bona fide top four defenseman. When he was brought back down to a third pairing role, he was, no disrespect to David Savard, but he looked like he was carrying Savard at times. So to me, I don't think you can take him out, and I don't think the Canadiens can afford to take Savard out right now unless the wheels completely fall off. So it is unfortunate for Jacki. It's a numbers game at this point, but his physicality isn't enough to warrant him being in the lineup at this point in time. The Canadiens have other elements in their lineup. Josh Anderson, to me, is going to play a big bottom six role in this kind of situation. And I feel like the rest of the roster is gonna be as aggressive as can be. Also, watch out, especially for a guy like Emil Heineman. He looked like he had wings last night.
Yes, nice to see recovering from that upper body injury. You wanted to know why he wasn't playing. He had an upper body injury, and Oliver Kapanen slots out. Heineman slots in. Let's get to some more of your comments here. And lots of people coming up talking about and expecting someone like Josh Anderson and Jaden Struble to Marco's earlier statement here. This is from Jason. I'm gonna run away and hide when I pop this question up on the screen because Marco might put his bald head through his laptop. But here it is. Marco, enjoy. From Jason this morning.
Can I
Marco
leave?
loves when we ask him about Sidney Crosby. Trade package featuring Mayu, Kapanen, and a first rounder, and my favorite, etc. Etc.
Yeah.
More.
Etc. is going to have a lot of weight.
I would say so.
There's no way that package is anywhere near enough.
No.
And the other thing is Sidney Crosby is not someone you trade for. If Sidney Crosby ever decides to leave Pittsburgh, first of all, I don't think it's this summer, but if Sidney Crosby decides to leave Pittsburgh, he'll pick his shot and the Penguins will try to get whatever they can for him. Yes. And that's it. And if you ask my honest opinion, he's just going to let his contract end and he'll choose his destination next summer.
Correct.
And
how many more years
could he?
Would you think he's got 5 years left?
Crosby, I think Crosby can play till he's 40. Honestly, but I mean that's also like 2 years from now.
Exactly. What's the situation here that Keats's question is something we react to? Like for me, if I see Demidov on PP1, I believe the world is the Canadiens are down 0-3 to the Capitals and their power play isn't working. What world is created where Demidov replaces Slafkovsky on the power play?
I think he should be replacing Laine on the power play. Not in his spot, but I think that's where it is. And I think, let's think about this for a second, okay? Yeah. Who do you have on power play 2 right now that is a straight sniper? Suzuki, that's it. But that's because he's being double shifted.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And then you could consider Demidov in that kind of situation just because of the pure skill that he has. Cool. But you don't have a go-to offensive weapon that could just unleash shots. You have a bunch of passers, but no real finishers outside of Suzuki, and he's the one running the unit. So in my honest opinion, I think it makes way more sense, especially with Mike Matheson being more apt for the fake left shot to whoever's on the left circle as opposed to the right circle, which we all remember from last year. I think it would, as we talked about before, I think it would make more sense to have Caulfield in his office on the left side, Demidov on the right side, Suzuki in the slot as the bumper, Slafkovsky in front of the net, and Hudson at the top. And that would emulate the diamond formation that made the Tampa Bay Lightning so dangerous on the penalty on the power play when they had Stamkos, Point, Kucherov, Killorn in front, or whoever else you want to put there, and Hedman at the point. And that diamond formation, the Canadiens played that formation for a smidgen of a time last year. And that's when you saw Juraj Slafkovsky unloading one-timers from the left circle or from the right circle, and he was scoring more on the power play. The Canadiens messed with that formula at the beginning of the season with Kirby Dach playing on the high right side for some reason. And then when Laine came back, well, they just shifted Cole Caulfield away from his usual spot, and that kind of tanked his power play numbers. and then, kind of put him in a bumper so he became more of a playmaker. Obviously, it really increased his assist total, but I personally think that Demidov should be on the first power play unit without question.
What about this defensive tandem here? Brady wondering about the future of Hudson and Guhle together and whether or not they should be paired together, split up. Hudson, in my opinion, Brady goes on to say, hasn't been nearly as good playing on his offside. Marco, what's your takeaway there?
100% agree. I 100% agree. The only problem, who do you put on their offside?
Yeah.
Right? Because Kaden Guhle hasn't looked necessarily great on his offside either. So do you put Mike Matheson on his offside and you run what the Canadiens had at the middle point of the season, which was Hudson, Matheson, and then the true shutdown pair, in my opinion, which would be Guhle and Carrier.
Right.
I think that's how they should go, because then that would recalibrate the minutes, and Mike Matheson could worry less about running up the ice and leave that part to Lane Hudson, and therefore be more or less risk averse and would calm his game down a little bit. My two cents.
Yeah,
but I just don't think that the Montreal Canadiens, A, feel that Kaden Guhle's at 100%, and B, feel that Lane Hudson's ready for the extra minutes at this stage of the season. But that's not my take. That's what I see them doing.
This guy, laceration of his quadricep muscle.
Yeah, he wouldn't have played. He wouldn't be playing right now if the Canadiens weren't in a playoff hunt or going to be in the playoffs. That says everything you need to know. He's not at 100%.
Do we have expectations against the Capitals? I just want to go 6. Really couldn't care less. We are in.
This is all learning.
I feel that though. I feel that, but once you're in, you want to show that you kind of belong. I still think there's this element of young players and good experienced guys like Suzuki and Caulfield. I think it's a good test. Let's see where you're at. Let's see if you can raise the level for a second and not get blown out, not get swept. To me, that's it. Don't get swept. Win a game.
Yeah, I equate this. I don't know for the older fans on the podcast right now. I equate this to when the Canadiens came back from the lockout in 05-06. You had a relatively young lineup. Paris Zogan was in that lineup. Chris Higgins, rookie Thomas Plekanec, Komisarek was still very young at that point. So a very young roster. And they just squeaked into the playoffs to play against the Carolina Hurricanes. And it was just really it was a learning experience for this younger core, right? Yeah. And then that core really kind of took off in 08, where they went on that run. I feel like that's the idea. So that they go 5, 6, 7 games, to me, it's the experience of making the playoffs and being in the playoffs and seeing what high caliber teams look like. I think is going to be the fun and the challenge of that, so that they can kind of go into the summer and know, hey, okay, this is what I need to do. Again, as I've been saying since basically a month now, the Canadiens are playing on house money, and any extra games that they get to play is just bonus. So if they can force a game 5, or heck, maybe if they can even force a game 6 or 7, that's gravy. That's fantastic.
What do we consider a win in this series? Showing that you kind of belong. Just that's it. Like we said, showing that you kind of belong.
If they can bring a third game to Montreal in this series, I would consider that already a win.
Agreed. Let me ask you a question. We have more to get to here. Starting to catch up. That question came in at 11:30. We are 11:53. So I was about 40 minutes behind. At least I'm getting closer. We're going to wrap this up in 6.5 minutes. Let me ask you this question. It's my own question. Give me a role player that steps up and helps the Montreal Canadiens be competitive in this series. Give me someone outside the top 6.
I can't believe I'm about to say this.
Give me a defenseman. I don't care.
I know. I'm going to give you one for each, forward and defenseman, okay?
Yeah, let's hear it. Go.
But if I would have said this name 2 months ago, me would have probably slapped me out.
Yeah.
Christian Dvorak.
Okay. And he's played so well since he didn't get traded, eh?
So this is my thing. Christian Dvorak's playing for a contract.
Yeah.
And that line is getting tons of minutes.
Yeah.
And, they're being matched up against the best of the opposition. They may not have the luxury of that on the road for the first 2 games, but maybe the Canadiens are able to kind of exert that kind of checking on the fly. As long as there's not too many stoppages in play, they're going to be able to match them up together. But what I think you really kind of need to look at is that he can bring an offensive element, and he's going to be leaned upon a little bit more in the playoffs because he can effectively win 55-60% of his faceoffs, which in the playoffs is even more important than in the regular season. So I have a feeling that maybe not necessarily on the score sheet, but if the Canadiens get to a game 6 or a game 7, it'll be because a guy like Christian Dvorak just was solid defensively. And again, he's playing for a contract, so there's no more motivation than that.
How likely is game 1 is on Monday for Washington? I'm going to Washington for game 1.
What? Take me with you.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
Road trip?
Yeah. Washington game 1. We know that.
Yeah, it should be on Monday.
Yes, it should be on Monday. The NHL schedule really is not, I mean, other than the games.
How prospective schedules were not already agreed upon? Because I remember last year it was sent out right away.
I was told U.S. media, U.S. TV stuff was what held things back a little bit.
Yeah, trying to get should be pre-negotiated
and get it organized. But like as of now, there's only 2 games officially on the schedule as it relates to the playoffs, and it's Saturday. 6 o'clock.
Well, we should know by end of day is what I was told.
Agreed. Yes.
I'm basically what I'm hearing.
Colorado, Dallas.
Yeah. Basically, what I'm hearing is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday.
Correct. Oh, they did it, Marco.
They sure did. They sure did. Do we have any other questions?
I mean, it's so many questions. Like, people really want Arbor Jacki, man. People are worried about the physicality and the size of Washington, and that Arbor Jacki is the piece to the puzzle. This is how they do it. This is how
I don't feel like the Canadiens, outside of the Ottawa Senators, whose bottom 6 is basically a goon squad. Yeah. I don't feel like the Ottawa Senators will be in any way, shape, or form a physical team against the Leafs. Swapping out Jacki for Savard could make sense on paper, but the problem is that you're not going into that kind of a playoff situation with just 2 guys with experience. No team is going to do that. Yeah. And again, no, you can't take Savard's penalty kill minutes away. And we saw the Canadiens, especially like, for example, last night, where the penalty kill hurt them very much. And if you don't have a guy like Savard to be able to hold it down, I don't know. But to think that a guy like David Savard isn't going to be physical himself and take guys out, or Jaden Strubl's not going to run someone over. Yeah. Again, I think it. And I agree with Surf X11 here. I feel like Jaden Struble saying that out loud is great. Yeah. So I feel like Struble's physicality is excessively underrated. I feel like Jacki's physicality is is slightly overrated in the sense that I feel like Jacki's timing on his hits have gotten better, a lot better, but it's still not there that it would take him out of position in emotional games like this.
Exactly.
That's where I think there's a fear.
Oh my God. Morgan, okay, I get it. You don't like golf. It's okay. Ignorant opinion. You might want to go look up Rory McIlroy's parents and what they did to get their son into golf. You might want to look up.
Are we really about to talk about privilege in sport? Because like that, there was an entire hockey debate last year that I don't feel like reopening.
Zach Hyman. But yeah, go look up. I'll give you a name. Go look up Aaron Rai, AARONRAI, and read about why he still uses iron head covers, even though he's a multi-millionaire professional golfer. I mean, if you're gonna troll me on golf, bro, you could be a little funnier than that. And yes, thank you, Morgan. You calling Sean Rich? Let's go. Hockey Dad, I wonder who and how many guys in Laval make the Habs next year. At least one. Don't you think?
I'll tell you one.
Like, the Canadian success, does it not allow them to be more patient with guys, Marco? Like Jacob Fowler and Owen Beck and everybody else?
Well, okay. So depends on who you talk, which guys you talk to. But you can look at a guy like Owen Beck. Yes, you could take your time with him because realistically he'd occupy a bottom 6 role and you already have a couple of bottom 6 centers available. Jacob Fowler, tons of time. I think that's fine. You look at guys like Joshua Roy, however, you're starting to get to that point where you should be kind of pushing for something like this. I don't know that there would be a Toronto-Montreal conference final. I feel like if Toronto and Montreal... Oh, wait, no, it's true. Montreal
There
would be
would
in
be.
the other
That's the only
division,
way
right?
they could meet.
It's the only way. Yeah,
Montreal
that would be
plays the
pretty
winner of
cool.
Carolina, New Jersey if Montreal wins.
Fair point.
Yeah.
So I just don't know that... I think the only two players, if they're still in the organization by September, that have a legitimate shot of making this team as it currently stands would be David Reinbacher and or Logan Mailloux. That's the way I see it right now.
Right. Robert Bouchard, let's not forget this team is not a cup-winning team yet. It will be as long as we stay the course. We have all the ingredients of a possible dynasty.
Yeah,
is that what the Canadiens are trying to do? Like, is that what teams trying to build a dynasty?
It's hard to build a dynasty in a cap era. But the Canadiens have done themselves such a service in signing an almost 90-point center to under $8 million for another 4 years or 5 years. A 70-point winger at this stage, probably potentially even more down the line at less than $8 million. We'll see where Slafkovsky ends up. Their number two defenseman is at $5.5 million for another 6 years. They have a lot of their core locked in, and they have Hudson and Demidov that they're going to be looking to keep around for a while. So they have their core, and now it's time to add to it. So because it's so locked in and the cap is going up so aggressively, they're going to have a lot of room to work with over the next 3 years to further improve on a team that's already playoff worthy.
Carbonated Turtle. That is a great username. Congratulations.
I definitely agree with this take.
How do you even come up with a name like that? How do you Carbonated Turtle? They have to absolutely shake up PP1. I mean, the power play, Marco, why has it been struggling? Why is it struggling? Why it's still on the struggle bus?
One of the things what I always do is when I look at an effective power play, like I'll look at the opposition, and you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, like they didn't necessarily, I don't think they scored. No, they didn't score on the power play yesterday, but their power play was dangerous. Why? Because even though Brent Burns was at the point, everybody was in constant motion. And the problem is when you have a guy like Patrick Laine doesn't move. Patrick Laine, he's got skills. He's obviously got a great shot, good size. His strides are so difficult to defend, especially when he gets the inside on you. He's got so many good positives, but one of the negatives that you need to point out in this case is he's got cinder blocks for skates. Right. And so his first two steps are so difficult, and all he tries to do is reach as opposed to move with the puck and move with the flow, that it hampers the rest. It's very easy to cut off passing lanes because we know where it's going. It's going to Lane Hudson. He's only got one track, and it's always going to be that little chip backhander. Teams have seen the tape on this. So at this point, it's no longer effective. You have to try something else. And in my honest opinion, like we talked about before, the Canadiens sliding back to that diamond formation that they were effective with last year, I think would do them a lot of good. And it would allow a guy like Nick Suzuki to be the rover they want him to be on the power play, playing in that bumper. So that would be my take in putting Demidov where Slafkovsky is now, putting Slav in front of the net, putting Cole Caulfield on the right side, on the left circle. Like, we've seen this. Cole Caulfield is a fantastic playmaker because of what he's doing in the bumper, but he's not scoring because of it. And I think that's kind of hurting the flow of it. And we've seen teams try to do that, where they try to use Cole Caulfield as like a decoy. For those that remember the 2021 World Junior Championships, the Americans used Cole Caulfield in the bumper so they could leave Alex Kaliev in the same way that they're leaving a guy like Patrick Laine alone on the left circle. Well, I don't feel like that ever works, and I don't feel like there's any help in doing that. In terms of this draft, in terms of talking about right-handed defensemen in the 2025 draft, the one that could potentially make a difference, in my opinion, is Radim Mrtka. It's not a very strong draft for right-handed shot defensemen. I'm going to tell you that right off the bat.
Yeah.
Which is the reason, for example, that you saw a team like Chicago pick a guy like Artyom Levshinov, because there's nobody in this draft in terms of a right shot that's as good as him. Not even in the same bracket. So when you have to take your shot, you take your shot on these right shots. The same thing with Calgary with St. Parik. And for all the flack they're getting, the same thing with Ottawa Senators when it comes to Carter Yakimchuk. Those three defensemen would be the top right shot defensemen in this upcoming draft right now. No questions asked. So what I would say is this is not a time to draft a right shot defenseman. This would be the time to trade for a right shot defenseman, because the Canadiens, where they're going, they don't have the time for a top end right shot defenseman to develop. And you're more than likely not going to get a guy like Lane Hudson that's going to develop that quickly. That comes around once in a generation, where a player is drafted that late and surpasses expectations and becomes an all-star.
We're going to save our predictions for the Canadiens and Capitals for a future episode as we get closer to game 1, and do our best to give you an in-depth look at what's going on. Before we let you go, Marco, give me a series outside the Montreal-Washington one you're most looking forward to watching play out.
Toronto versus
me too.
Ottawa.
Me too. I think it's going to be violent, physical, nasty. I can't wait. My favorite.
The Ottawa Senators have the exact style that would act as the kryptonite for the Toronto Maple Leafs, that would lead me to believe that's going to be a long series.
And I know everyone's in Toronto. They're selling you on this. Even in the Martin St. Louis, it's a goalie defensive identity in Toronto now, and we'll see. I don't know. Can what do they say about tigers and changing stripes and stuff like that? Can that be done? I do not know. What I do know is you don't want a tiger as a pet, Mike Tyson style. But if you do have a pet and you want to take care of it, you're going to find the best place imaginable. And that's Silver Pod Dog. You can find them at silverpoddog.com, and it's their Everything Pet Warehouse sale event. You can save up to 80% off May 2nd through 4th at Gallery Day Source. And guess what? Part of the proceeds go to support SPCA West. So not only are you saving yourself a few bucks, you're also helping an unbelievable project in the SPCA West, and part of the proceeds from the Everything Pet Warehouse sale event, where you save up to 80% off on high-end pet toys and treats, beds, sweaters. So, like, it's the type of thing, like, maybe you want to get a new barbecue. You don't go get a barbecue in July. You should go get it in, like, November, December type of deal, right? So if you're looking at exactly jackets and sweaters for your dog for next winter, now is the time to go get them. And you can take advantage from their warehouse sale event at Gallery Day Source, May 2nd through 4th. And the Sean Starr Show is giving you a chance to win $200 in a gift certificate. Just go to the link that I posted in the chat. I'll post it to a pinned comment here. Just click on that link, enter your name, enter your email address, and you're in the draw. Just like that. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Marco D'Amico, thank you so much for being a part of this special celebration of the Montreal Canadiens making the playoffs for the first time since 2021, and they did it, and they won their way in. They didn't see Patrick Waugh do them a solid. So yeah, I'm not going to be watching the Blue Jackets and Islanders game today. What are you doing tonight? You don't have hockey to watch unless you want to.
Sleeping.
You're going to sleep. The man has been hard at work. So enjoy your rest. Enjoy the relaxation, because we got to rev the engines up. We got to rev them up again for game 1 in Washington. All signs point to it going down on Monday. Marco D'Amico, thank you so much. And don't forget, we're back tomorrow morning at 10 as Marco lays the groundwork for the Calgary Flames pick, the Habs first round pick this summer. What are they going to do? Tune in tomorrow at 10 and watch. Marco, thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure, guys. Congratulations, Canadiens fans.